Okay, so contracts, right? Not the most exciting thing to talk about, but
Oh, yeah.
definitely important if you're running a business or really doing anything in the
Absolutely.
business world. And for this deep dive, we've got some excerpts from a guide
Okay.
on writing professional business contracts and agreements. So by the end, you'll know the important parts,
Yeah.
the special language they use, and even get some tips on how to write
Mm.
your own.
It's really key. I think a lot of people, they get into business and they maybe have like just a loose idea of what a contract should look like,
Yeah,
but they don't really get down to the nitty gritty. And that's really important. It's almost like, if you're building a house,
right.
you got to have a blueprint.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you just have a pile of wood
Right.
or whatever it is you're using.
Yeah, so let's lay out our blueprint here. The guide actually starts out with some lesson objectives, kind of like, what are you trying to get out of this?
Mm-hmm.
And it really emphasizes making sure you know what's actually in a contract, understanding that language, and then, like we said, even being able to write your own.
It's interesting because a lot of people, they think of a contract as something that's very limiting.
Right.
It kind of boxes you in. But really, when you understand contracts, you can actually gain more control.
Right.
Because you can negotiate better terms. You can make sure that you're protected. So it's almost like a secret weapon.
Yeah.
That gives you more flexibility, not less.
Okay, so let's start unlocking this weapon right away. The guide jumps right into some key vocab, some words that pop up a lot in contracts and that are really important to understand. Words like liability and breach. So I guess first off, can you just talk a little bit about, common situations where somebody might find themselves, liable for something?
Well, I mean, liability essentially means you're responsible, right? You're legally responsible. So, let's say you sign a contract to deliver a
Yeah.
product and you don't deliver that product on time and let's say because of that delay,
Yeah.
the other party loses money.
Right.
Well, you could be liable for those losses.
Okay.
Or let's say you provide a service
Yeah.
and the service is faulty in some way and it causes some kind of damage, right?
Right.
You could be liable for that too.
So it's not just about not doing something. It's also about maybe doing it
Exactly.
poorly.
Yeah, not fulfilling the terms of the contract as as they were agreed upon.
Now, what about breach? I mean, that's another word that gets
Right.
tossed around a lot.
Well, breach is essentially breaking the contract, right? Violating the terms
Okay.
of the contract in some way. Now, that can be very blatant, right? You don't make payments on time.
Right.
You don't deliver the goods at all. But it can also be more subtle,
Okay.
right? It could be that the quality of the goods that you deliver isn't up to par.
Mm-hmm.
It could be that you share confidential information.
Okay.
So there are different ways to breach a contract.
And I'm guessing the consequences of a breach also kind of run the gamut.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it really depends on the severity of the breach, right?
Right.
And what the contract itself says.
Right.
If it's a minor breach, maybe you just renegotiate.
Right.
But if it's a major breach, then you could be talking about legal action, financial penalties, even the termination of the entire agreement.
So it's not a one size fits all kind of thing.
No. It's a whole spectrum.
Now, moving on here, the guide then gets into some of the grammar
Right.
that we see in contracts and how it kind of how it works.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things it focuses on is what are called conditionals. Those if this then that
Right.
kind of statements.
Like hypotheticals.
Right, exactly, yeah. And the example that the guide gives is if either party fails to comply, penalties will apply. So can you maybe give another example
Sure.
of how a conditional statement like that might be used in a contract?
Sure. Let's say you have a contract for website development. So a conditional statement might be, if the website is not delivered by the agreed upon date, the developer will reduce the final payment by 10% for each week of delay.
Mhm.
Right. So it's very, very specific.
So that really lays out very clearly the potential consequences
Exactly.
of not hitting that deadline.
Right. And it helps prevent disputes later on.
Right.
because everybody knows going in, okay, if this happens, this is what's going to happen.
So that's that's one way that kind of very clear language can be helpful in a contract. Now, speaking of clear language, the guide also gives a bunch of common phrases that we see in contracts, some of which sound very formal, right?
Yeah.
Failure to comply with these terms may result in legal action, kind of thing.
Right.
Why that serious tone?
Well, you have to remember that contracts are legally binding documents.
Right.
Right. So it's not just about sounding impressive.
Right.
It's about being very clear and unambiguous in the language that you use.
Okay.
Because if there's any kind of vague wording,
Right.
it can lead to misinterpretations down the line, and that can be very costly.
So it's almost like we're speaking a different language when we're writing
Yeah, in a way.
these contracts.
Yeah, it's the language of law.
Right.
And that's why, it's so important to at least have a basic understanding of contract terminology.
Right.
Because it can really make a big difference.
Yeah.
In how you feel going into a deal, whether you feel confident and protected,
Right.
or whether you feel kind of lost and vulnerable.
Now, at the end of this guide, there's some activities, and they suggest, hey, why don't you try drafting a really simple contract and also try analyzing one. So first off, if you were going to just sit down and write a basic business contract, what are the must-have elements that you would absolutely include?
Well, first and foremost, you have to identify the parties involved, right? Who are the players? Who's doing what for whom?
Right.
And under what conditions? You have to outline the scope of work or the services being provided very clearly with no room for ambiguity. Payment terms are crucial. Timelines, procedures for handling disputes.
Okay.
You got to think of all the potential, issues that could arise and address them up front.
And then flipping that around, what if you're the one, reviewing a contract that somebody else has drafted? What are some of the red flags or the warning signs that you would be looking for?
Well, I'd be looking for vagueness,
Okay.
Any kind of loopholes. Ask yourself, are the obligations and responsibilities of each party clearly defined? Does the contract address what happens if something unexpected comes up or the circumstances change in some way? It's also important to make sure that the contract is consistent with current laws and regulations in your industry.
Okay, so there's a lot to watch out for.
Yeah.
But I think, this deep dive has given us a really good foundation to start with.
Absolutely. And the main takeaway here is that contracts are tools.
Right.
And understanding them gives you power, right? Power to negotiate better deals, to protect your interests, and to build better business relationships.
So a contract is not just this, piece of paper.
Right.
It's something more than that.
It's a foundation for trust and clarity.
Well, I think that's a great place to leave it. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of contracts, and we will catch you next time.
See you later. Say TNWE.